Well, if you want to know how people connect with nature, ask them.
So I connect with nature through both my employment and also my personal life. Um, so I guess I've always enjoyed being out in nature on a personal level, and I found it a place of comfort and also a place where I feel probably most settled. I sometimes hate when I've then got to go back to a city, and you can kind of feel the anxiety build up when you hit peak hour traffic and lots of people.
Getting detailed responses from 4,000 people across the whole of Australia. It's a significant way to find patterns in how people are connecting with nature. Dr. Emily Fleece is a lecturer in geography, planning, and spatial sciences at the University of Tasmania, and she's corralling these 4,000 nature connection surveys. Hello, Emily. What are you trying to find out?
Hello, Helen. How are you going?
Well, thank you.
Yeah, so we're trying to find out what nature connection means to Australians, the diverse ways that people connect with nature, what they do there, where they go, how it makes them feel. And we're trying to relate that back to the actions that they take, what's called pro-environmental behavior. So whether or not they take action for the environment, doing things like planting native plants or volunteering for bush care and conservation work and voting for green policies, and how that nature connection relates to their well-being. So those major things are what we're looking for, how nature connection, what it is, and how it relates to our well-being and our pro-environmental behaviors.
Right. Is there a broader definition of what it is to connect with nature than necessarily a green policy?
Yeah, it's one of those funny things, Helen. It's both incredibly intrinsic. Most people hear the term nature connection and they've got a sense of what we're exploring, but it's also complicated, right? So when you dig into the science of it, there's lots of ways of explaining nature connection. One that I like is that it has three major dimensions. It has the philosophical element, the identity or the emotional element, how we feel emotionally connected to a place, and then the experiential side, so what we actually do when we're out in nature. And I think one way to think about these is that will relate for a lot of people in Hobart is the aurora experience a couple of weeks ago, 2 weeks ago. Did you get to experience that, Helen?
Yeah, and it was the whole of Tassie, wasn't it? It was everywhere.
Yeah, it was all of Tassie. And what was that like for you?
Oh, it was awe and wonder for me. It was incredible.
Yeah, so nature has this potential to make us feel awe and wonder. And for a lot of people, myself included, that aurora reminded us of how infinitesimally small we are, how we are part of this incredible, huge universe, and how tiny we are as part of that. And that can actually be really comforting sometimes, recognizing how connected you are to all these other things, to everything else on the planet, to all these other people. I felt that in Hobart. We were driving around and you could see people walking around looking for the aurora and having aurora parties, like going to their friend's house and out on the deck to see it together. And nature also gives us that opportunity to have those shared experiences and that opportunity to connect socially with one another and then connect with everything else, all the other life on this planet.
And how did you make sure you were talking to a cross-section of people?
Yeah, so we did this study. You're talking about this survey that we ran last July. So this was a national survey. We surveyed 4,000 people across Australia, and we did that with an online panel. So we were able to offer the survey to people of a certain demographic, so we could make sure we had a cross-section of different genders and ages. We wanted equal representation across the states so that we could explore patterns across the different states and along an urban to rural gradient. So we actually oversampled people in regional Australia because we're a very urban population. And if you just sample across a representation of Australia, you don't get enough numbers in regional and rural areas to really say much about those populations because your sample size is just too small. Right. So we oversampled those areas so that we could, be able to say something about what's happening there. And we looked across different educational backgrounds and socioeconomic status. And we asked them these questions about what nature means to them, how connected they are using different sort of validated tools that you can use to explore these different dimensions. And we asked about their pro-environmental behaviors and their well-being. And what we found was, really Yeah, really exciting. So it really validated how important connecting with nature is for our pro-environmental behaviors. So we found that people who are most connected with nature were 64 times more likely to be doing pro-environmental behaviors than people with the lowest levels of nature connection. And that's a huge difference. You don't see those numbers typically in an odds ratio, so that was really powerful. And similarly, we found a really strong connection between nature connection and well-being. So in particular, life satisfaction, so how satisfied people are with different elements of their life. And people who are really connected with nature were 4 times more likely to have the highest levels of life satisfaction. And we found that nature connectedness scale, that was 8 times more important for determining life satisfaction than socioeconomic status, which we know is such a powerful influence on our health in so many ways. So it really reinforced for us how important connecting with nature is, having that relationship with nature, and how much of an impact it has both on how we treat the environment and also how well we are as humans.
This is Dr. Emily Fleece, who's a lecturer in Geography, Planning and Spatial Sciences at the University of Tasmania, with you on evenings on 936 ABC Radio Hobart and ABC Northern Tasmania. I'm Helen Shield. When you said Green at the top of the conversation, did you mean specifically the Green Party, or are you meaning pro-environmental in general?
Oh, just pro-environmental in general.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So those pro-environmental behaviors, there's so many different ways to do things for nature. So what transport we choose, what professions we choose, what we vote for is important there too. But then it's the little behaviors that we take, at home and in our daily lives. So all of those things are part of, pro-environmental behaviors.
Yeah. And what has surprised you in what you found in the patterns in those 4,000 responses?
Well, so the power of those numbers was surprising. So we didn't expect to see nature connectedness having such a huge influence on pro-environmental behaviors, and to be 8 times more powerful than socioeconomic status in influencing life satisfaction.
Wow.
But yeah, there were a few other interesting little tidbits. Like I mentioned, we oversampled in regional areas, and that we found something exciting there. So people who are living in regional and remote areas in Australia had a higher level of nature connection, and so did people who grew up in regional and remote areas. And actually that growing up in those types of environments was a really powerful predictor of how connected to nature people feel, or how connected to nature they are as adults. So that childhood environment and growing up around nature, immersed in nature, is really important in shaping lifelong connections and the benefits that come from that, both for the environment, the pro-environmental behaviors, and for our own well-being.
Right. Were there barriers which showed up in the results?
Yeah, so that was another interesting one, both intuitive. So we did ask people, first of all, do you want to connect more with nature? And the vast majority said they did want to spend more time with nature. But we also asked, so why don't you? Why aren't you spending more time? And what are those barriers? So the number one barrier across the board was not having enough time. So that's not going to surprise anybody. But when we looked at the barriers according to socioeconomic status, people in the highest quintile, so if we divide the socioeconomic status into 5 brackets, people in the highest bracket were 5 times more likely to report time being the main barrier than people on lower incomes. But for all the other barriers we explored, people on lower incomes faced higher barriers for health issues, so they're 8 times more likely to identify health issues as barriers to connecting with nature, 4 times more likely to identify cost, and 3 times more likely to identify safety concerns as their barriers to connecting with nature. So it was really interesting to see how those barriers are different for people across different income levels.
Yeah, right. If you're sick, you don't have a car, and you're living in the suburbs, the chance to enjoy the wilderness has a lot of obstacles.
Yeah, that's right. And that finding about the regional and urban living environments is really important, especially for such an urban society like Australia. If most kids now are growing up in cities, we really need to make sure that they're getting those nature experiences when they're young, so they can develop that relationship that's going to, shape the rest of their lives.
Mm-hmm. What else do you want to unpick from all this data you've collected? Well,
there's a lot more that we want to be investigating, and this so this work is funded through the National Environmental Science Program through the Sustainable Communities and Waste Hub. And this program is, sponsored by the federal department that manages our environment, the Department of Climate Change, Energy, the Environment, and Water. And it aligns with Australia's strategy for nature. So the Q, Department of Climate Change, Energy, the Environment, and Water, sponsors research to inform how they can manage our environments in Australia. And so that's really what this whole Nature Connection project is trying to inform, is how we can connect Australians with nature, because that's actually the number one goal of Australia's strategy for nature, which I think surprises a lot of people, that the number one goal isn't, conserve large tracts of land or, protect endangered species. It's connecting all Australians with nature. And the reason for that is because of this relationship with pro-environmental behaviors. And if we, are connecting people with nature, they're more likely to take action to protect it throughout their lives and into the future. So we want to be able to inform for the federal government, how do we do that better? How do we support people to connect? How do we help them overcome these barriers now that we've identified them? Once we're, as we learn about the diversity of ways that people connect, and there are many different ways that are, equally powerful and support people to build those connections with nature. What are they, and how do we support people to do that, especially in a way that leads to pro-environmental behaviors and well-being?
If you talk to farmers who love and preserve the place they live, it can be another definition of what pro-environmental behaviour can be.
Oh, absolutely. And some of the most, nature-connected people are people who live closely with the land, right? So it's farmers and fishers and hunters and people who recognize how intrinsically connected we are. That living so closely to the land really does that for us, and and can create many pro-environmental behaviors as well.
And what's the storytelling portal?
Yeah, so this Nature Connection project has a couple different arms. We have the survey, which is sort of our broad but shallow way of understanding nature connection across Australia, right? We've done this 4,000 people surveyed, and that's one way that we can get a quick view, a quick peek of what nature connection means to people. But another arm of it is the storytelling project, and that's how we get the depth, right? We ask people to tell us their stories. What does nature mean to you? How does it make you feel? Tell us about a time when, you felt happy or you felt awe or you felt sadness, and how does, nature relate to your life? And so we're getting some incredible stories from people about what nature means to them and how it, impacts those pro-environmental behaviors and well-being. And so that gives us the real depth of understanding, what nature is and how people are connecting.
Yeah, right.
So that's something that is ongoing. We have a website called the natureconnectionproject.com.au, and people can submit their stories there in any form. So it can be a video or audio recording or artwork, or a written story that you can put up you can submit to us through that portal. And then we share them. You can also go there and see all these diverse, wonderful stories that we have from people right now just around Tasmania. We are hoping to expand nationally. We're applying for some funds to do that. But right now we've got all these wonderful stories from around Tassie about nature connection. And then we're going to be doing the research, qualitative research, so, understanding the meaning of those stories on the back end of that. And then we can use that to write some reports about what we've learned about nature connection.
Thank you very much. Dr. Emily Fleece is a lecturer in Geography, Planning and Spatial Sciences at the University of Tasmania. That site is thenatureconnectionproject.com.au.